In this example, we're going to look at creating the vectors for the sign that you can see here. We'll be looking at ways that we can create vectors, how we can edit them, and how we can create text. So we'll just go and close this. So let's go and create a new file. So in here we've got our job setup form. So I'm going to enter some values. So for the width I'd like to make that 24 inches and we'd like to give that a height of 36 inches. We'll set our Z0 to be on top of our material block and our material thickness is going to be 1 inch. I'm going to set my XY datum position to be in the centre of the part and then I can press OK. Now the first thing I'd like to do is draw a rectangle. So if we come to the Create Vector section and we can use the option to draw a rectangle. Now I'd like to set my anchor point to be in the centre there and I'll make that X0, Y0 and make sure my corners are square. We're going to give that a width of 15 and a height of 30. We'll press Create and close. So now I'd like to draw a circle. So again, come into the Create Vectors section. I'm going to draw a circle. I'm going to make the centre point at X0, Y0. We're going to give that a diameter of 21 inches. I'm going to press Create and close. Now what I'd like to do is align my circle to the top of my rectangle here. So with that selected, I'm going to hold down Shift and then I'm going to select my rectangle as that's the shape that I'd like to align to. And then I'm going to come over to the Transform Objects section. I'm going to use the Align Selected Objects option. I'm going to align that to the inside top edge of the last selection. And we can see that's moved my circle to the top of my rectangle. So I can close that. And now I'd like to make some offsets. So I'm just going to click in the white space just to deselect everything. Then I'm going to select the circle. I'm going to come over to the Offset and Layout section here. I'm going to use the option to offset selected vectors. Now with this vector selected, I'd like to offset that outwards by 3/4 of an inch. So I'm going to put in 0.75. I'm going to uncheck Create Sharp Offset Corners and uncheck Select New. I'm going to press Offset and that's created that new circle. Now if the original circle is still selected, I'd like to offset that one inwards this time. So I'm going to select the option to go inwards. This time we're going to go with 1/2 inch and I'd like to use the option to select New. Press Offset. We can see it's offsetted that inwards by 1/2 inch and it's now made the new vector the selected vector. Now with that new selected vector, I'd like to offset that one inwards by 4 inches. Press Offset there, and then with that one selected, I'd like to offset that inwards by 1/2 inch and offset that like so. Now staying in the offset vectors form, I can come over and select this rectangle if I wanted to, and I'd like to offset that outwards by 3/4 of an inch. So I'm going to put in a distance of 0.75, and I'd like to also select the option to create sharp offset corners so it keeps those corners of the rectangle. I'm going to press Offset, and we can see that's put that in place. Okay, so now I can close the form. And with that vector selected, I'm going to hold down Shift and select this outer circle here. What I'd like to do is weld those vectors so that we get the silhouette of the two shapes. So if we come over to Edit Objects and use the option to Weld Selected Vectors, we can see that that's created the silhouette of those two shapes there. I'm going to select this rectangle here, Shift and select the outer circle there, and do the same where we're going to weld selected vectors. Now I'd like to create some vectors that are going to represent the holes that we're going to use to hang the sign. So if we go over to Draw a Circle, I'm just going to snap to the top corner there. You can see that my cursor's changed. It's telling me it's snapping to that point there. I'm just going to roughly sketch in a circle. Then I'm going to specify a diameter of 1.25, press Apply and close. Now with that vector selected, I'd like to move that. So I can come over to Transform Objects. I'm going to move Selected Objects. I'd like to move that relative to its current position by 2 in X and negative 2 in Y, and press apply and close. So I'm happy with the positioning of that vector, but I'd like to create a mirrored copy over on the other side here. So with that selected, let's go to Transform Objects. I'm going to mirror selected objects. I'm going to make sure Flip About Job Center is selected and Create a Mirrored Copy is also selected. We're going to flip that horizontal, close that, and we can see we've got our two hanging holes there. So now I'd like to create a cross section that will be used with the 2-rail sweep modelling function when we come to create our border between these two drive rails here. So to do that, I'm just going to roughly sketch in a rectangle. So we'll come over to the Create Vectors and draw a rectangle option here. I'm just going to roughly sketch in a rectangle there and then put in some values here. So I'm going to give that a width of 3/4 of an inch and a height of 1/2 inch. Press apply and close. What we need to do now is look at editing that vector in order for us to create an open vector that we can use as a cross section. So with that vector selected, let's go over to zoom selected here. Okay, so you can see it's zoomed right in on our selection. I'm just going to zoom out just ever so slightly using the wheel of my mouse. I'm just pushing that towards me. And then I'm going to come over to Edit Objects and we're going to use the Node Editing mode. Now I'm going to hover over this span here and I'm going to right mouse click and I'm going to delete that span. I don't need that as it's a cross section. We've got to make sure this is an open vector. So now we have an open vector like so. I'm going to select this node here and I'm just going to snap that to the center of the shape. Okay, so you can see the cursor's changed there and it's telling me that it's snapping to the center part of the original shape. Okay, so I've got that there. Then we're just going to alter the shape of this vector now by putting some Bezier spans in. So I'm going to right mouse click, I'm going to apply the Bezier, or you could press B on the keyboard. So I'm going to put that into Bezier mode, and then I'm just going to pull on this control node and level that up like so. And the same for this one, I'm just going to level that, maybe pull that out slightly. So I've got this nice round curved shape here. I'm going to do the same to this bottom span here. I'm going to right mouse click to Bezier or B on the keyboard. I'm just going to level that out and then I'm going to pull on this control node here or the handle and level that out. So I'm going to select that node and then I could just use the right arrow key on my keyboard just to knock that back ever so slightly. Okay, so there we go. I'm happy with my cross section shape that we've got there. So I can come over and say zoom to fit. So now we're ready to draw the leaf motif. But before I do that, I'd like to draw in some construction vectors just to break up the parts so I can clearly see the different segments that I'd like to work with. So I'm going to go into draw a polyline tool. I'm going to snap to this point here and I'd like to snap to the centre of the circle. We can see the cursor's changed. It's telling me that we are snapping to the centre of that circle there. So I'm going to click there, and I'm going to drag that out and snap to this point here. I'm going to press space bar as I'd like to draw a new line, but I want to stay in the polyline tool. So by pressing space, it's just going to enter that in for me, and then I can create a new line. So I'm going to snap to this point here, snap to the centre, and then snap to this point here. I can come over and close that. So now I've got 4 different segments. Using the scroller of the mouse, I'm just going to zoom in on this left area here. I'm going to draw in another polyline, so we'll go to the Draw a Polyline tool. It's going to snap to the centre of this area here, and we're just going to drag that across and snap to this side of the circle here, and then we can close that down. So the next vector I'd like to draw is the sort of dome or the berry for our leaf motif. So I'm going to go and draw a circle. I'm going to snap to the centre of that polyline that we just drew there. And I'm just going to roughly draw a circle. Then I'm going to specify a value to put in there. I'm going to give that a value of 1.5, press apply and close. And now we're ready to draw in the vector for our leaf. So I'm going to use the draw a polyline option. So I'm going to select that. I'm just going to roughly sketch in the shape of our leaf, like so. Then bring that back together. Just going to close that. I'm going to select the vector. I'm going to go into node edit mode to really change the shape of that vector. So if we go into node edit, I'm just going to draw a rectangle around the bottom 3 nodes there to select them all. Then I'm going to press S on the keyboard, and that's going to smooth those for me. And now I can really start to change the shape of our leaf by moving the nodes and pulling on the handles to really just change the shape until we're happy with the way that that looks. Okay, so I'm just going to pull over here, move that over. Okay, and then if I wanted to, I could just click into the white space just to see how that looks, and then go back in there just to maybe make some more small tweaks. I just want to make that a bit more rounded at the bottom there. Just pull that out a little. Let's have a look at that. Okay, so it's not too bad. Maybe bring that in a little more and pull that out. We bring that round. Let's take a look at that. Okay, so I'm happy with that now. So I'm going to go into the selection mode. Now ultimately with that leaf we're going to model that using the 2-rail sweep. So what I need to do is I actually need to go back into node edit mode. So I'm going to select that, go into node edit mode, and I need to cut the vector. So we're splitting it in two. So if I right mouse click over this point here and say cut vector, then right mouse click over this point here, say cut vector there, we're now left with 2 separate vectors, and they will form our drive rails. So now we've got our rails ready, we can go and create our cross section that we're going to extrude along these 2 rails. So for that I'm going to go and draw an ellipse. So I'm going to use the draw ellipse option, and I'm going to give that just going to roughly sketch that in place here, and then I'm going to give that a width of 1.5 and a height of 0.6. Okay, I'm going to press apply and close. As with all cross sections, we need to make sure that they are open vectors. So I'm just going to zoom in slightly, just using the scroller of my mouse. I'm just pushing that away from me, and then we're going to go into the node edit mode. I'm going to hover over this span here, and we're just going to delete that span. I'm going to hover over this span, right mouse click, and delete that span there. I want to box select this node here, so it's just this part is selected. I'm just going to pull that over here. That's going to create a nice cross section for me. Okay, so I'm happy with that. I'm going to press escape on the keyboard to come out of node edit mode, and then let's just say zoom to fit. And so now I'm ready to go and create some text. I'd like to use this circle here as a guide to align our text to. So I'm going to put the word fresh in this segment here, and I'd like the word coffee to come and sit in this segment here. And so what I need to do is I need to trim this circle to the construction lines that we created earlier to create curves that we can align text to. Now before I do that, I'd like to keep a copy of this circle. So I'm going to right mouse click, and I'm going to select the option to copy to layer. We're going to say new layer, and then I'm going to call this layer safe. I'm going to make that invisible and inactive and press OK. Now we can check that that's gone over there by going to our layers tab, switch off layer 1, switch on safe, and we can see that there. I'm going to turn that off, switch on layer 1, make sure it's bold, that means it's the active layer, and then we'll go back into the drawing tab. Okay, now we're ready to trim our circle to our construction lines. So if we use the interactive trim option, I'm just going to snip over here, and then snip there. We'll close that, and we can see that we've got our 2 curves which we can align our text to. So now I'm ready to draw some text. We can do that by using the draw text option. So I can insert a word in here. So I'm just going to type that in. I'm going to go with fresh and coffee there. I'm going to choose the font. I'd like to use impact. So if I press I on the keyboard, it's going to take me to all the I's. I'm going to use the impact option. I'm going to give that a text height of 2.5, make that in the centre and press apply. And we can close that. So the idea is to have the word fresh aligned in the top segment here and the word coffee in the bottom. Now at the moment it's one entity and I need to break that up. So to do that I'm just going to right mouse click. We're going to go to the option break text block into lines and we can see now we've got two separate text blocks. So now if I select the word fresh and then holding down shift select this top curve that we've got here, we're going to come over to the create vectors section. We're going to use the option to wrap text along curve. Okay, so we want to maintain the text size. The position we want to make sure that's above the curve, so it sits above here, and we want to keep that in the middle. We want to align it to the curve so it follows the shape of the curve. So let's press apply. Okay, so you can see how that looks. The text isn't where I want it to be, it's on the other side, so if we select this option here to put text on the other side, it will move that where we want it. I'd also like to put in an offset distance of 3/4 of an inch. You can see that's instantly put that in there for me, and so I'm happy with that. So now I can select my coffee text, shift and select the curve that we want to align that to. So we're going to use the same settings as we did before, except this time I want to position the text below the curve so that the word coffee is sat underneath that vector that we've got there. And if we press apply, so the text has gone onto the other side, so let's go back into the form and uncheck text on other side. We can see that's instantly updated that for us. Another option we can use in this form is the text spacing, so we can alter the spacing, make that closer together or further apart if we wanted to. Okay, so I'm happy with that, so let's press apply and close. And so going back to the text spacing, we do have an option here, edit text spacing and curve. So if I select our coffee text, and you can see that I have two arrows that are pointing at each other. Now if I click, you can see that's bringing those closer together, and if I hold down shift, and we can see the arrows have changed and we can move them further apart. Okay, so I'm happy with the way that that looks, so we'll just go back into normal selection mode. So now we've got our text in place, we can start to delete all of those construction vectors that we used in order for us to create the curve vectors to align our text to. So if I select this vector here, holding down shift, I'm going to go and individually select the other vectors that I don't need. I'm going to right mouse click, I'm going to use the option to delete, or the shortcut key on the keyboard is delete. Delete those, and then I need to think about bringing back the vector that we copied to the safe layer. So if we go to the layers tab, I'm just going to right mouse click here, I'm going to say delete layer, I want to delete that safe layer, and the software is going to warn me that this layer contains data, and it's asking us what we want to do with that data. Do we want to move it to another layer, or do we want to delete that data? Now we want to move it back to layer 1, so we're going to say OK there, and we can see it's brought that back. Now if we go back into the drawing tab, and I'd like to create another piece of text that's going to sit in the bottom section here. So if we go over to draw text, I'm going to type in the text. So I'm going to type in magic and beans, and we're going to select our font. Okay, so the font I want to use is called Cambria, so I'm going to press C on the keyboard to bring up all the C fonts, and I'm going to locate my font. Here it is, Cambria. Select that. I'd like to make that bold, and I'd like to align the text to the centre. I'm going to give that a text height of 4 inches and press apply. We can see that's been put in there. Okay, so I'm going to close that down, and then what I'm going to do now is just select it and holding down Shift just to keep that in line, I'm just going to bring that down like so. Now what I'd like to do is bring the words magic and beans closer together. Now I could use the break text block into lines option, or I could use the edit text spacing and curve, or what we call kerning. Okay, so I'm going to select that, and then we can see that the two arrows are pointing at each other, so we know that they're going to bring the text closer to each other. If I just click, we can see it's done that. Click a few more times, maybe 5 or 6 times, until I'm happy with the spacing in between those two words. Okay, so I'm happy with that. Let's just go back into normal selection mode. And I'm going to select them, select it again to put it into transform mode. I'm going to hold down Shift, I'm just going to drag that down just to position that in place. Okay, so I'm happy with the height of the part sitting in the bottom area nicely there, except I just need to alter the width of the text. So if we go to transform objects, we're going to use the set selected object size. What we want to do is just alter the width, so I'm going to make sure that link XY is unchecked, as I only want to change one of the values, and we're going to change the width of that to be 14, and if we press apply, we can see that's taken place there. So if we close that, and we'd look at VCarve in that text. So the last thing that I need to do now is draw the coffee beans that are going to sit in the central part of our sign. So I'm going to come over, I'm going to use the option to draw an ellipse. I'm just going to roughly sketch in a shape, just make that roughly around 7 by 3. We can close that, so I'm happy with that. I'm going to select that again to put that into transform mode. I'm just going to select the blue handle in the corner, and that's going to allow me to rotate the vector. Okay, so I'm just going to rotate around 10-20 degrees until I'm happy. And then now I'd like to create another copy of this vector, but I'd like to make that a little bit smaller. So I'm going to hold down Control, hold down Shift whilst in transform mode. I'm going to grab on one of these corners, just shrink that down. Okay, so the Control's giving me the copy, Shift is allowing me to scale that in proportion, and then we've got our smaller bean there. Okay, it might be a little bit small, so I'm just going to make that a bit bigger, and then roughly position that in place. Okay, and then if we just select our circle, and I'd like to use the option zoom selected so you can get a good view of both of those beans. Then with this the smaller bean, I'd like to create a small dimple in the vector there. So with that selected, let's go into node edit mode. And I'm just going to insert some points. I'm going to right mouse click here, say insert a point, right mouse click here and insert another point, or I could press I on the keyboard in order for me to insert the point there. I'm just going to select the middle node and just pull that in. Okay, so we've just got that sort of groove here. Okay, so I'm happy with that. So let's just go and zoom to fit so we can see the part as a whole. What I'd like to do is align the coffee beans to the centre of our circle. So I'm going to select the first bean, shift and select the second bean. And what I need to do is group them. That way I can retain this composition. If I don't group them and then align them to the circle, they'll both individually be aligned to the circle, so we'll lose that composition there. So I'm just going to go and group those, so we can do that by coming over to the Edit Objects section. We're going to group selected objects, so it's now one part. Now with that selected, we're going to hold down Shift, select our circle that we want to align the beans to the centre of. We're going to go into Transform Objects, Align Selected Objects. We're going to align that to the centre of the last item in the selection, which was the circle. We can see that's done that there. So if we close that, okay, so we don't need these as a group anymore, so we can just ungroup them by coming over to Edit Objects, and we'll ungroup objects back onto their original layers. Now what I'd like to do is draw in a crease for the bottom coffee bean. So I'm going to select this circle here. I'm just going to come over and zoom selected so we can get a better view of that. I'm going to go and use the Draw a Polyline tool, just going to roughly sketch in a shape that resembles a crease in a coffee bean. Okay, then I'm going to right mouse click to come out of the polyline tool. I'm going to select the vector. I'm going to come over into node edit mode. I'm just going to hover over this node here, smooth that point, hover over this one, smooth that. I could also press S on the keyboard if I wanted to. And then I'm just going to alter the handles until I'm happy with the shape of that crease. Okay, so I'm happy with that. What I might want to do actually is select this bean and just rotate it slightly, and I might just make it a little bit smaller. So I'm just going to hold down shift to bring that down, and then let's take a look at that. So we'll say zoom to fit. Okay, so I'm happy with that. And so that completes the vector creation for this sign, where we've looked at lots of different tools that has enabled us to draw and edit vectors. We also looked at how we can easily transform the shape of a vector just by using the node edit mode, and saw how we can create text and how we can align text to curves and edit text spacing. So at this point it is a good idea to go ahead and save the project. So go to File, Save As, we'll call that Magic Beans Vector. Save. Then you can access that in the project folder.